Good morning, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. My name is Esther Miruri, and welcome to Learn Something New today. And please hit the subscriber button and let us grow together. So, what is LSNT? So, Learn Something New today. It's a platform that has been founded under the principles of ensuring that every day we are engaging in conversations that enhance our knowledge and enable transfer of knowledge and information that will help you improve your life, maybe standards, or improve the way you do things. So feel free to comment in the comment section below and give your feedback. Apart from the topics that I have lined up for interaction and conversations, I will be inviting you, or I'm inviting you now, to actually suggest some of the topics you'd like us to discuss. As I said, it's a platform that is open for learning, and every day we would like to learn something new. So feel free to reach out to me for any idea that you may have. And this does not, it's not limited. So as long as it is a content that is respectful to everyone, and that is something that has potential to impact people positively and influence change. So you feel very much welcome. So in the topic of today, I would like us to learn something. Probably you will not learn something new if you already know what I'm going to talk about today. But briefly, I would like us to just introduce a very topic, how can I say this? A topic that I really carry very close to my heart because it has shaped the person I've become. And I have seen how through my work, a lot of people have been impacted positively. And this is something to do with disaster management, humanitarian action, things to do with environment, and now security and intelligence. So, but today I would just like to focus on disaster management. And before I get to disaster management, which is something that will be covered in the subsequent sessions, I would just like us to understand what is a disaster. So according to the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office, a disaster is something that has the potential to disrupt human, daily lives and cause catastrophic destruction, and then the affected community or population have no capacity to respond. But something that has been very interesting about the definition of a disaster is that it has never been universally agreed, and this is because the impact of disasters have been very varied, from one person to the other. Even within the same disaster scene, the impact is so different, so it becomes very difficult to actually define parameters for a disaster. And also in terms of different parts. For example, in Kenya, we have different parts. We have parts that are more developed than the others. We have parts that are more populated than the others. So that means that if a disaster happens in a more populated area, then we have a more likely impact in terms of human life impact compared to another area that has fewer people living in that. However, if you look at how are these two communities affected. Even the community that has fewer people, even the fewer people that have been affected, to them that is really a huge number, On this other hand, when you have a huge population, like it, carries a lot of weight in terms of, okay, it's a lot of families that have been affected. So in terms of resources that are needed to respond, to restore life back to normalcy, it also carries a lot of, cost in it. So something just to note is that a disaster or an incident, a disaster is never a disaster until it has human interaction. So if, for example, an earthquake happens in Mount Kenya and there are no people there, then that is not considered a disaster because it has not caused any human loss or property damage. However, if you look at that in terms of environment, even natural hazards cause environmental destruction, then again, if that happens, then is that considered a disaster, and up to what degree is that impact considered? So if you look at all those aspects and factors, then it becomes very difficult for people to actually say this is exactly the threshold for a disaster. The other aspect is that it is quite easier to call a natural hazard or a natural disaster, to actually give it, the name disaster. But what happens to other accidents or other disasters, emergencies, like for example, something happened in an industry and it ended up, causing a lot of fire, or something that has just happened because of either human error or ignorance, or someone just didn't do their job well, so is that also considered a disaster? So it's quite interesting, and if it is considered a disaster, is from whose perspective? Is it from the person, who has caused the error, or is it from the people who have been affected by the consequences of this person? So it's quite interesting, and this is a field that has really evolved with time to actually try to bring a common understanding and more research around that, so that people are able to understand what should we actually be looking at, what are the parameters when we are actually defining or coming up into close to an agreement of what is a disaster. And this is a challenge that will continue for some time. Probably will not be able to get to fully understand this, but it's something that really needs an in-depth study of the areas that are affected, so that you're able to define local thresholds and also build the capacity of the people at the lowest level, so that they can know what to do and to actually limit or reduce the impact in case such a thing happened. So disasters are usually classified in several types. We have natural hazards, or rather, a disaster is never a disaster until it causes, I had mentioned that earlier, until it causes human life loss or property damage, So if it is not a disaster and it happens, it does not cause any of those, then it's called a hazard. So before we get to a disaster, we have hazard, which pose risk to human life. And when the hazard actually happens and causes harm, then it becomes a disaster. So we have different categories of hazards. So we have natural hazards, we have biological hazards, we have technological hazards, we have meteorological hazards, we have complex situations. So, for example, when we talk about natural hazards, these are hazards that are caused by natural processes. For example, some of the natural processes that we know is that during the formation of rocks, there are usually, geological processes such as the movement of rocks, the seismic movement, and platonic forces. So these forces cause, a lot of energy beneath the earth's crust, and this could cause things like, earth tremors or earthquake. So these are some of the things that really human nature probably have no capacity to, alter or change their movement, So some of these things then we classify them as natural hazards. Then we have meteorological hazards. So meteorological hazards, these are hazards that are caused by variation within the variability of climate. And this could be something like floods or drought. So why do I say that? Because if, for example, with the climate changes, now that we are aware that climate is changing and it is causing extreme weather events, so something like extreme weather events, something like high temperatures may automatically, lead to drought situation. On the other hand, we also know that we have prolonged rains, or we have heavy downpour that we have recorded for over years. Then all these can cause floods. So then we are looking at areas that never used to have drought, they are now experiencing drought, or even areas that used to experience drought, they are now experiencing drought throughout the years, or they're experiencing drought in a more prolonged way, more extreme way, than we have ever seen before. If you look at the floods as well, we are seeing places that never used to flood, they are now more flooded. Places that were habitable, they have now been submerged by water. We have seen the lakes within the Rift Valley, they have started changing. The sea level is rising, and all these things they are somehow connected to the climate variability or meteorological processes. Then the other aspect or the other type I mentioned is technological. Technological, we are looking at technology failure. For example, we can have an industry where all systems are automated, but because of maybe power went off, some machines or some processes were interrupted, so that could result into leakage of maybe dangerous liquids, could lead to fire, could lead to explosions, and all these things could really cause a lot of harm to people. Then we could also have the other type is biological hazards. As we have seen, especially now with COVID-19, we have had a lot of incidences where we have seen how disease outbreaks can actually cause widespread disaster across countries, across regions, across the world. And some of these diseases have been, especially now, they're spreading more because we have better technology. People are moving very fast from one area to another. We have migration, we have better modes of transport, So we are really actually aiding more transmission using the things that we have created to make our life much better. So, and then the last one is the complex. When we talk about complex is when you have maybe one or more of those things happening at the same time, or you have other incidences that are actually caused by conflict or unrest, and they end up having population suffer or communities suffer from that. So some of those things is something that I would like us to talk about. Talk about fire incidences, at our homes, at our in the business places. How can we make sure that we know basics of what should we do in case a fire happens, and to identify what are some of the best lessons in other parts that we can borrow from. So that is the topic of today, and I hope you have learned something new. If not, don't worry. In the next session, we will make sure that, or we will try to make sure that we build on the content and make sure that we are able to talk about something that can actually make you learn something new from there. So it's some of these discussions that I'm looking at having, so that we can have more interaction, we can learn from each other. Like for me, I think one of the big lessons I really have learned is how to make my hair. Like, I did this all by myself. Yeah, I did this by myself all the way up to behind, without anyone to help me. And it's something that I never thought I would ever do. so I would also be looking forward to also learn from you guys. I want to take much of my time learning, and this is a platform that will also give me an opportunity to learn from you, from my audience. So feel free to leave your comment below and suggest topics that you'd like to have covered, and if you would like to be to be featured in this topic, feel free to let me know, and then I will get in touch. So thank you so much. Have a good day, have a good morning, have a good evening. Bye.